a nice flat surface to work with. This obviously will just roll around on my cutting board without any sort of control on it. So you want to start by creating a nice flat surface on both ends before you start peeling. Now, obviously, this has much less chance of slipping. Your next step in the skinning is to start with, have a look at the thickness of your skin. The first cut's always going to be the toughest on this, but you want to use this as a general guideline for starting your first cut. And then now, once you've got that first cut done, we've got a better guideline to start working. You'll notice that my body posture is not what I just discussed previously because I'm turning things around and for the sake of demoing. While I'm actually doing my cut, again, we need to dial this space in, you'll see that I'm trying my best to keep everything squared with my body. I have a comfortable stance. This table height is actually good for my physical height, but I'm not hunched. I'm not reaching up too high, and I'm certainly not trying to cut something that is too far away from my body. This is going to be different for everyone's height and different arm lengths and that sort of thing, but find that comfortable spot. Especially as you're going to be doing this, if you're going to be doing this for extended periods of time, this will save on back strain, but having that awareness when you start is going to be really important. And also, my arms are not tucked into my elbows, tucked into my sides from my elbows. I'm relaxed, and I'm using all of my energy to keep control over my knife. The other thing that's important that I see people doing is they try to use torque to get through product. Your knife should be sharp when you're starting. You don't need a lot of torque to use this tool. Let the sharpness of the blade do the cutting for you.
So when you say torque, it's like you mean like force?
I'm
right?
not. Yeah,
like
I'm
all your weight down.
exactly. I don't need a lot of pressure on this right now. The work that I'm doing, there's very little chance that my fingers are going to get underneath this blade because this is a large piece, right? As you're working with finer things, maybe onions or shallots, or you're chopping parsley, etc., you're going to run into a potential where your fingers could be underneath that. We're going to talk about that when we get to the peppers. But the same philosophy applies, the same mentality applies regardless of what you're cutting. Let the sharpness of the blade do the work. If you can avoid it, again, this will come with practice. All of these things will come with practice. I can say this as much as I want. I can't make anybody a great cutter. They have to do that on their own. But you can see that I'm not, one of the other common mistakes is I see that people will try to saw through it. This is something that comes with practice, but you want to aim for as little movement as possible. The sharpness of your knife is going to help with that. As you start doing melons, you may need to come back and forth, but you'll see that as I was sawing back and forth, my first few cuts that were one line, nice and clean. As soon as I started sawing, now my lines are starting to get all over the place. So now I have to go back and have a look, see what part I missed. I'm also a little on the anal retentive side, and so I like things to be nice clean lines and nice and smooth and nice and straight. Again, this is not the best body posture. If I was just doing this without demoing, my eyes are trying to stay above the line of where I'm cutting. So I just want you guys to see as best you can. And then now I can just do a quick tidy up of the spots I couldn't see. This is really where we're thinking about the consumer. We're thinking of the consumer as ourselves. I can't imagine anyone wants to eat any of this. And so we want to be conscious that we're not expecting our customers to be eating any of that. The other part of it is that if we're not peeling this in its entirety, we haven't added any value. Now that consumer has to do it again. They have to start to trim it. there's no value there. And then again, I'm trying my best not to reach over my body to clean any of that space off. I'm just going to use my knife, my hand that's already on this side. Like I said again, annoying time. If I were doing 6 melons, I'd be doing this step for all of my melons before moving on to the next one, which would be to core it. Something else that we're going to look at getting is actually some Cambro containers for you, so that if you're tall enough and you want to, you can raise up your cutting board so it's at a more comfortable height. And then you'll also have a nice little bin here that you can just scoop your cut product in. What else were we missing? Another thing I was... Thank you. So now once everything is peeled and cut, we have all the coring to do. I was shocked to find that this is one of your only spoons that you have in here, so it's on my list. You're gonna get better coring spoons for doing this part. I'm just gonna scoop right into the compost here, and simply I'm using the spoon to... This melon is at a very nice ripeness, so this came out quite nicely. As the melon gets riper, this will become messier, juicier. And again, the thought is here: am I as a person, as a human being, comfortable with eating everything that's left here? If that answer is yes, then you've cleaned it well enough and you've done a good job. I didn't do a very good job because there's some brown bits there that I left. And so now that all 6 of my melons have been peeled and seeded, it's time to cut. Again, I'm going to try to make as comfortable of pieces as I can. And now, let me preface this. I don't have a full understanding of each spec of each SKU that we make. So if I am dicing to the wrong size, you can ignore that for now. We're talking about knife skills here, not redesigning all of our SKUs. So just disregard that part.
Will we be getting descriptions or photos of each
Yes.
SKU?
Absolutely. One of the little bits of homework that you guys are going to have, probably more this group is going to have, is, and this is what I heard last week, or on Tuesday, sorry, is that that's not always clearly defined on all of the specs. And so that will be a part of what we go over, is really clearly defining all of that stuff. We're going to use as much common objects as possible to describe those things. So for example, the julienne of onions on the fajita kits came up on Tuesday. And asking 2 different people what the right size was, got 2 different answers. And so we'll use common objects like pens, or the handle of a knife, or the thickness of the cutting board, where we can. Sometimes it'll just have to be 1-inch dice. 1 inch is a fairly understandable measurement. Yeah, so it'll be a different case on each one, but we're going to try our best to spec those products out for common, easily understandable, and commonly understandable measurements. Everyone knows how big a big pen is, so you can make your dice or your julienne the thickness of a big pen. This, I'm targeting a 1-inch dice on this. I don't know if that's the spec, but. And the important part is that you want to target the center of your cut to be a 1 inch, if that's what we're doing. So there's always the understanding that with something like a melon, I'm not going to get perfect 1-inch dice out of this because it didn't start as a square. So as long as your average size piece is meeting the spec, then you've done your job. How can I describe this now? Again, I've been cutting for so long, some of these things I just take for granted. When it comes to a shape like this, let me just start over again. When we comes to the shape like this, where do we find that 1 inch part on this? We almost have to create it by creating a 1 inch from the outside edge to where the blade is. Is it going to be perfect? No, because I still have a little scoop there, but you have to start somewhere. So the same thing on the other side. Again, you can see that one has more of a cave than the other. That's fine. We can ignore that. When it comes to getting the outer rim part of it, again, how do we do that? Well, the idea is to start where the imaginary center core would be. This will be more obvious when we get to onions. But start where that imaginary core is, keeping your fingers on the opposite side of your blade, and just imagining that 1 inch from the center towards the outside. Once that primary cut is finished, now it's a lot easier to start on one end and get to that 1 inch portion. So again, I'm starting at the imaginary core and working my blade from that core towards the outside. Oh, is that a good angle for this? And there's our approximately, it's probably closer to 1.5 inches, I'd say. But if you look at the overall amount of product there, it looks fairly consistent.